Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon, good morning, good evening, based on where you've joined us from today. Thank you for being with us for the 14th episode of the IET India Digital Conversations. Today's session is curated by the Digital Communications Working Group of the IET Future Tech Panel. The Future Tech Panel is a thought leadership think tank that aims to be inclusive, neutral, and a credible platform, working towards bringing key industry stakeholders to be one step ahead of the changes happening around us owing to future technologies. Now, coming to today's topic, it's on clearing the 5G obstacle course in India. But what exactly are we trying to clear? What is the need of 5G when we haven't been able to deploy 4G in its effectiveness? Is there a clear demand for 5G, and will India be ready for it now, or if not, then at least in the next 2 years? There have been various forms or forums where 5G has been discussed. So what's new in this one? I'm sure all of you, if not some of you, had these thoughts or questions in your mind. Well, today we have an interesting and diverse CXO panel who will share their insights on the digital shift, the impact on network, and what's the immediate call to action to make 5G in India for rest of the world and 5G in India for India. I'm your weekly host, Suman Bhaumik, and I lead the events development for the IET in India. Introducing the moderator for today's session, Monica Gupta. Monica is the chair of the Digital Communications Working Group of the IET Future Tech Panel and has helped us curate this session today. But that's only her part-time role. In her full-time, she is the Vice President and Global 5G Engineering Lead at Capgemini. I will pass this on to you now, Monica, and we'll all look forward to a high-energy discussion today.
Thank you so much, Suman, and hello, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking this time to join us today. Extremely excited to be talking on 5G, and even more excited to be part of this discussion because we have an absolutely wonderful panel of experts. Before I introduce the experts, what I would like to highlight as the unique part of this panel is that one is, of course, understanding 5G and when it will come in India. But it is also the fact that 5G is already available and launched in the rest of the world. So the unique distinction of this panel is it's a global, regional experts coming in from their different work experiences who bring in their experiences from other places and what works for India, how it works for India. And along with that, the more interesting part is the diversity. So we have, our experts coming in from the area of works of standards, from the industrial and the manufacturing industry, and then the global telcos, both from the US and the UK and European markets, who would bring in and share their outside-in perspective and what we see or what we can potentially see happening with respect to 5G in India. So given this, expert panel and this diversity, the thought we had was that we will first start with Adrian and Deepak, where they would set in the tone with respect to the standards and what 5G is being defined as a technology and what Deepak sees and, what is the impression and perspective Deepak has coming from the industrial and the manufacturing world. And then we will go towards the solution providers and the telcos as to what are they doing with 5G and collectively, how do we see 5G coming in India? And like Suman correctly said, 5G in India has two flavors to it. The global R&D happening in India with respect to 5G, it's already happening. And then 5G coming in India, which I'm sure will come very soon. So Adrian, welcome, and starting with you. How do you see 5G standards and technologies maturing this year?
Thank you, Monica, and welcome to everybody on the webinar. May I say this is perfectly timed, this event, because it was only 2 weeks ago that 3GPP completed what they call the second phase of 5G standards, otherwise known as Release 16. And it is the combination of the first phase, Release 15, and that second phase, Release 16, which is the basis on which we have seen some 60 commercial networks, 5G networks, already launched. What the first phase, Release 15, offers is really standards which address the mobile broadband use case, providing capacity to those networks who are already exhausted with their 4G capacity and providing extra performance. That second phase, Release 16, really starts to address the new use cases, the industrial use cases, which demand much more higher performance, ultra reliable, low latency type communications. Is that the end of the story? Well, no, it's not. I mean, completing phase 1 and phase 2 of 5G is a very good step forward, but it is only the start of a process, not the end of a process. What we expect to see now is a continued evolution of these standards for many, many years to come. It's inevitable. 5G already has an awful lot of traction in the market. Every day in the press, you will see another announcement about a 5G deployment or an intended 5G deployment. This is much faster than we actually anticipated. It's faster than we've ever seen before. And I think it's inevitable that there will be a demand now on the standards bodies to evolve this very solid basis so that we address new functionality, new performance requirements. We will have a 5G plus, a super 5G, and I guess eventually we will end up with a 6G, which actually some people are already talking about. So in summary then, we've got a very solid basis. Phase 1 and phase 2, release 15, release 16 are complete. It's the basis on which many networks have been launched. Those networks can be launched in both a non-standalone configuration, meaning that you connect the new radio to your existing evolved packet core, your 4G core network. You may deploy this new radio attached to the new service-oriented 5G core network. You can deploy these standards in both licensed and unlicensed spectrum, which is a very important distinction. And you can also use it in both public and private configurations. So we have a very solid and rich basis now upon which we can launch our 5G networks.
Very, very relevant and very interesting. So Adrian, just as a next follow-up question, you just mentioned that this is just the start. So any key milestones and what are the key developments which we can expect on the roadmap in the next few years?
I mean, there's an awful lot to be done. Of course, after release 15 and release 16, you would expect us now to be thinking about release 17 and release 18. These are very much in the planning stage. We have a pretty good idea where we'll be heading in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think we can sort of divide the evolution into two sort of factors. We have new features which we'll be adding to this standard, and we have new performance improvements which we will add to the standard. I think if I was to pick 1 or 2 of the notable big pieces of work on our agenda, one is certainly the integration of non-terrestrial components within our 5G portfolio. This will allow the widespread use of satellites, not just for providing access, but also for providing backhaul to the networks. We will see extensive work to include drones, unmanned aeronautical vehicles. There is a huge demand, given the industrial applications, to dramatically improve the accuracy of our positioning capabilities. It's no longer sufficient to be able to work within a few meters. We need to work within a few centimeters if we're going to penetrate the industrial domains. So significant work needs to be done on the positioning capabilities. The ability for devices to work device to device, which we call side-link communications, will address an awful lot of new use cases. And we do need to have a look at significant enhancements to make that side-link communication much more effective and robust. And that's very much on our plans for release 17. And of course, there are other elements which are maybe not be so commercially driven, but environmentally driven. We need to dramatically improve the energy efficiency, of course, of our 5G network design as we go from release to release. So I would summarize this by saying that as we go forward, release 17 and release 18 won't be a large set of small enhancements. It'll be a small set of large enhancements. And I think you will see some very, very significant improvements, driven largely by the fact that we have industry sectors that are really waking up to the fact that 5G can do something for them. And some of these are maybe not quite so obvious. If I think of the maritime sector, for example, significant interest from maritime who see 5G as an answer for controlling ships within harbours and even controlling lighthouses and navigational facilities that they have in waterways. We have exploration and mining and agriculture, and all of these sectors are now waking up to the fact that this 5G stuff is really, really good. But if we're going to meet their needs, we need to understand what those needs are. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to change our design at all, but it means that we have to explain to these communities how our networks can be used in their specific domains. So as we go forward, much more attention to what some might call vertical sectors or the industry sectors, with which traditionally we've never actually dealt with before, but now we really must deal with.
Completely agree with you, Edwin, and thank you so much. In fact, coming from the telecom industry, having worked in the telecom industry for all these years, I think it is on us as a charter and a key, if I may say, our KPI to make 5G for B2B a success, because that's what we are all working for. So just one, last question to you before we kind of move to the industrial world. I'm sure Deepak is listening to all of this very intently. Do you see any adjustments or any impact due to COVID-19 to the 5G roadmap and what's being planned for 5G?
Well, I guess that's a rhetorical question. I mean, if everyone is impacted by COVID-19, it is unavoidable, and standardization and telecommunications and ICT don't escape that. If I look purely at my business, which is writing standards, we have done relatively well, I would say, in coping with the impact of COVID-19. We've continued to write our standards, and indeed 2 weeks ago we finished release 16. Was that easy? Well, no, it wasn't. It was actually very difficult. We have taken a machinery which is very much used to physical face-to-face meetings, large meetings with many hundreds of delegates sitting in a large room, and we've had to understand very quickly how we can move that to a virtual instance where everything is done online. Now, working remotely and working online is fine. We're all doing that. We're all at home, and actually we're doing very well doing our daily jobs. If you want to do that with 600 people in a meeting, it is quite a different dimension. Of course, things run fine. All the time you have a harmony and agreement. It really isn't that difficult. But of course, the very nature of our work is exploring evolution and new ideas, which means you will have contention, you will have disagreement, and you will have to try and carve a direction through diverse views. And what we're really missing are two very important factors. One is the ability to go for dinner, and the other is the ability to meet in the bar. Now, anybody who has worked in a standards environment know that dinner and bar are the two places where we reach consensus. That's where all the difficult things are threshed out, and that's where you can talk open and you can really be frank and honest with people, knowing that it's not actually being recorded, it's not actually being written down anywhere. And we're missing those capabilities to actually solve conflict by the two tools that we know very well, which are dinner and bar. And in the absence of those two, of course, we've had to try and find other ways. Invariably, what it means is that we are, some argue, between 30 and 50% as efficient as we would have been had we have continued with physical meetings. But again, we've managed to do our work. We have completed release 16. We don't know when we will go back to having physical meetings again. That may be 6 months' time. It may be another year. We really don't know. But we think we're well equipped to continue what we do, which is writing standards, with the inevitable impact that there will be a delay to release 17 and release 18. So we're looking something between 3 and 6 months, I would say, delay in the completion of our next release. Again, depending on when we are able to restore to physical meetings and how much contention and conflict we actually incur as we start to look at evolving these networks. So yes, it's had a big impact. Yes, we've managed to cope with it, but it will have an impact on time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so, Deepak, coming to you now, I'm sure, over the last few years, you would have been overwhelmed listening to 5G for industry, 5G for industrial operations, 5G for B2B. So, you are actually surrounded by the so-called telecom people with you. So, a starting question for you. What is the world how is your world? What are the key, digital and automation transformations happening in your business, in your manufacturing world? What does your world look like?
Hi, Monica, and thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. Now, in terms of the way I interpret the question, Monica, that you're asking is that, okay, what are the transformations that are being driven by digital and automation that I see? For me, the first major trend, I would say, is what is classified broadly as servitization. But I think it goes a bit beyond servitization. I think it is about really leveraging digital for offering a holistic solution from the customer perspective. So, going beyond what we do, we today sell what we call as smart RN. Basically, we have equipment, connected with telematics, etc., etc. But the natural thing to go from there, if I take agriculture as an example, is that okay? You move from there to offering the harvester or the equipment as a service. So can we start offering that equipment instead of selling it to really the in a more optimum way to my customers to really use it on an hourly basis? Okay, so yeah, so I mean, I was basically talking about really leveraging digital, to really provide holistic solutions, really going beyond servitization. The couple of other trends that I see is really leveraging digital to provide a superior customer experience with respect to the brand without the need to build a brick and mortar channel. Okay, so how do I leverage things like IoT, the connectivity, the smartphone proliferation to really offer a superior customer service without actually really need to build a brick and mortar channel? Okay, and lastly, I think something which is driven by COVID is around the remote working. I do think that obviously, that is something which we have experienced as a reality. But to me, that goes beyond just really white collar worker. How could I actually use remote working capability to actually make even, let's say, manufacturing processes, even the farming processes, lot more productive? How do I leverage technologies like, connectivity, computer vision, various technologies to actually provide a much higher productivity or even solve the skills issues with help of remote working?
Got it. Actually, very interesting 3 points. Very interesting 3 points. And Deepak, while you were telling us about the digital in your world, you use the word digital and technologies. So what are the different technologies which you use in your world, and what is your impression about 5G, and how do you see you are leveraging 5G?
So look, I mean, as I mentioned, we obviously are using IoT quite significantly. We do use cloud services. We are looking at obviously leveraging microservices-based architecture and setting a backbone of basically technology which is based off that. We are looking at leveraging low-code, no-code capabilities, and of course the AI, ML, and the analytics capabilities. Those are obviously things which we are at various stages using. I do think, basically 5G will play a significant role in enabling newer applications based off connectivity. I talked about remote working. I do, basically applications which would need lower latency, higher bandwidth, which will drive higher productivity, higher efficiency, and more sustainable practices in manufacturing and agriculture. I think that is one area where definitely 5G will be leveraged.
Got it. And given your regional role and the fact that you come from a global MNC, do you have any experiences with 5G already, or for that matter, have you identified any asks from the solution providers to be willing to try 5G out? So what are your thoughts on that?
No, not really. I mean, I won't say that we have actually had at this stage any real significant experience. We have been talking about things. We've been talking about, especially from the manufacturing perspective, what can we do in terms of smart factory? What can we do to enable much simpler connectivity, as well as let's say connectivity which enables newer applications. But this is all on paper right now. Very frankly, when I look at the other aspect in terms of farming and some of the more this thing, I mean, right now I wish we even had very good 4G connectivity. So there is a challenge. I do think telecom providers, one of the key tasks for them would be to really try and look at how do we manage the infrastructure and how do we kind of address the challenges.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Thank you. So now that you've anyway kind of, you've actually helped me frame the next question. So now I'll kind of move the focus towards our telecom service providers. So, and I'm sure Sandeep and TS have both been listening to what you have been saying. So, Sandeep, you heard Adrian talking about the 3GPP standards, the phase 1 and phase 2, focusing both on 5G for consumers, and release 16 focusing on business, industrial things. You also heard Deepak about already looking at the other digital technologies and also keenly looking at 5G, using Deepak's word, theoretically on paper right now. So what is your view with respect to 5G for consumers and 5G for enterprise businesses, and what does it require to make it happen?
Yeah, so see, when I think of 5G for consumers, going forward, it's hard to think of consumer use cases without thinking of this whole COVID situation, right? Which is really leading to the most profound change in the consumer preferences going forward. So from a consumer standpoint, we're talking about a massive business case of virtual everything going forward, right? Deepak did mention about remote working, this whole talk about the touchless retail, all kinds of consumer experiences you can think of, how we consume education, how we consume healthcare, right? Everything is going virtual. So there is absolutely a very strong, consumer use case. When I think of B2B2C kind of scenario, where it's about offering a solution to a business, which can ultimately go to consumer, I think from that angle, it is increasingly a platform play, in my view. A case in point here, for example, Verizon did a partnership with AWS in what we call mobile edge compute, which is really about offering the last mile, very, very low latency kind of connectivity at a scale, leveraging all of the developer ecosystem who are so used to writing code for AWS already, right? Leveraging that in terms of low latency, smart city kind of use cases. So platform play is extremely important. And on the B2B side, in my view, there are a lot of interesting use cases unfolding in the industrial sector, right? So a case which comes to mind is Corning, which is one of the fiber optic, manufacturing organizations. They have been experimenting with how can they deploy 5G inside of a plant to do like truly automated, shop floor management, joining all the upstream, downstream supply chains, doing things like worker safety, and increasingly a very, very interesting experiment on the remote robotics. Right, so those are few areas where I have seen experiments happening already, and I see strong cases. Consumer, just to sum it up, consumer led by this whole pandemic situation, a strong platform play, in B2B to C kind of a scenario, and a heavy industrial sector automation, from a B2B perspective.
Got it, absolutely. So, Sandeep, it's very interesting. If I hear Deepak, he mentioned AI, ML, he mentioned IoT, he mentioned cloud, he mentioned remote control, remote surveillance. You mentioned mobile edge computing, and of course, connectivity, 4G, 5G. How does it all come together? The end-to-end solution is actually leveraging all of these together, and then, of course, the devices, the sensors. How do you actually make this happen? I mean, and also you use the word ecosystem, and it's an ecosystem and platform thing. How do you make all of this work?
Very interesting question, Monica. And before I explain you about the ecosystem, let me just share one statistic, which I think will be interesting for the audience. So whenever you and I look at something, for human eye to register a response, such as I'm looking at Monica, I'm looking at Deepak, it takes about 10 milliseconds, right? So that's the latency of the human eye, or the response time of the human eye. In a 4G ecosystem, typically we're talking about a latency of 40 to 50 millisecond. In other words, 4 to 5 times slower that of a human eye kind of a response. Now, getting into 5G, we are getting into a world where we will see latencies which are going to be much better than our God-gifted ability. So that is just one example of how machines will likely get better. And I'm sure experts can make out all kinds of use cases which can come out of it. So when we are in such a new situation, I think it begs the case for a very, very strong ecosystem play, because we'll have to mobilize a lot of creative thinking to be able to think of new solutions and how to really operate effectively in this very, very new world of technical capability. So very quickly, three flavors of ecosystem that I think of. One is, as I mentioned earlier, when my video got cut off, which is the lab-oriented experimentation. Very, very important to drive the experimentation between startups, academic research together, along with some of the initial pilots, which telcos and other solution providers are putting together. So that's one flavor of ecosystem which I think is important. The second ecosystem is, I think, what Adrian mentioned in the beginning, which is around driving a lot of interoperability. He did mention 3GPP and all multiple versions of that, which have come out. Whereas, and also earlier this year became part of what we call 5G Future Forum, which is basically a combination of a bunch of industry players trying to come up with interoperability standards in 5G and the MEC kind of use cases. And then there is a third angle of these ecosystem partnerships where we already have specific industry players which have expertise in a certain domain. Now, Deepak mentioned AI/ML, right? A case in point here is IBM, which has done a lot of really great work in cognitive sciences. So how can we partner with the likes of IBM and leverage all of this 5G capability which is being built and take that to market in terms of industrial solutions, smart robotic management, etc. So those would be my kind of three different versions of ecosystem, Monica, which I see playing a very, very heavy role in 5G going forward.
Absolutely. And, I can't more than agree with you, because, coming from the Capgemini consulting solutions and services world, I mean, I would completely agree. It's all about putting all these functional layers together. And I would not immediately ask Deepak, but at the end of us all speaking, I would love to hear back from Deepak of how impressed and how convinced is he to at least, move from the theory to at least the experimentation with the practical. But then thank you so much, Sandeep. So, yes, you have been, you've been hearing Adrian, you've heard Deepak, you've also heard Sandeep talk about Verizon. So how does 5G and the new technology look at in your part of the world, in UK and Europe? What is it that you see happening in your part of the world?
Okay, I mean, it's interesting. Why would you invite? So you invite an exec from standard bodies for a 5G webinar. Great. You invite an industry exec for a 5G webinar. Great. You invite a telco that's actually rolling out a 5G mobile network for a webinar like this. Great. Why do you invite a company that actually provides fiber connectivity? Right. That's what we do as code. And we'll probably talk a little more when I respond to this question. The previous speakers made my job easier because they've already joined the dots for me. So what are we seeing in Europe? Like Adrian said, you see enough news about a number of areas, the number of telcos that are launching 5G. And this has been going on since 2019 every day. So if you go to a website called the 5G Observatory, it'll actually tell you who's launching on a weekly, monthly basis, who's gaining and using spectrum, what are the different regulatory bodies doing. right? And we all know, probably a year and a half ago, there were no launches. And now we know the number of telcos that have gone into 5G. But I think in our neck of the woods, or in the UK and Europe, and UK is probably more familiar to me than the rest of the world. Yes, we do have all the big major players have launched their 5G networks, whether it's O2, Vodafone, EE, 3, etc. We have the UK is seen as one of the early adopters with coverage in 140 cities, etc., etc. But that is important. But like the speakers before me said, Adrian, Deepak, and Sandeep, 5G is all about ecosystem play. And there's a very nice article by one of the managing directors for UK and Ireland from Nokia, where he's gone on to say that 5G is not just another G. It is about end-to-end connectivity. It is a lot about fiber. That's number one. And which is why Colt is interested in this domain, because it's a lot about the mobile domain. It's a lot about in-building coverage. It's a lot about new radio systems. It's a lot about the 25 different use case areas. It is also about leveraging high bandwidth capability in the front hall, mid hall, and back hall, and in network slicing, and in extending the coverage of network, and in the collaboration and the creation of an ecosystem. Now, we talk a lot about the consumer aspects in the UK, Europe, in many of the countries that have also already launched 5G. I think it is important as we reflect upon what's happening on the industrial side, because a very good Informer survey tells you that, and Sandeep alluded to it, the huge focus is on revenues from the B2B sector or the B2B2X sector, in addition to the consumer sector. In fact, the dynamics tends to dominate in the B2B2C or B2B2X sector or the B2B sector. And there's a lot happening in the UK, in the Europe. You have the 5G test beds and trials. You have a number of PPPs that are actively driving this platform ecosystem. Never before have two things been more important, the way I see it. One, the importance of connectivity. And I'm not going to use the cliched COVID story. And more importantly, the ecosystem and the platform play. A few examples. BT Sport have started launching using 4G in the earlier days and 5G to do their sports shows. And there's a very interesting article because the technicians go and set up the cameras, set up the connectivity using 5G, and there was a leading media exec that said, you know what, I don't need to go out to do the production. I don't need to go out to do a live broadcast. And I'm quoting her, she said, I'm able to have breakfast with my son at home while the production is happening. So great trial. So what is important is, what are the things that are happening that drive the change culture, that drive all these industries, that drive the PPP, that drive all the trials. As Colt, we are working to make sure that coverage, industry solutions in venues, retail, hospitals, smart centers, smart cities are all possible through this ecosystem. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sure there'll be more questions to come. But all of this, in summary, in the UK and Europe, there are lots of trials happening. There are lots of investments happening in practically all of those areas, those use cases, those domains that the previous speakers have spoken about.
Clear, absolutely clear, TS. And really like the way you stitched the whole thing together and also connected the dots. and also made it so relevant, because I mean, this is something which even I kind of completely agree. It's no longer wireline, wireless, and which have been two silo worlds till now. It's actually the convergence and the coming together, and which is where it's more about the ecosystem and the end-to-end solution. And absolutely. So TS, I mean, and specifically for you, given the fact that, you have been with DOT and you've had such a vast India experience and a global experience, how do you see all of this coming to India? What of this, how of this, what of this will work in India and how?
I think you raise a very interesting point. And because you talked about my DOT career, I am going to take a minute to talk about my nostalgia, but I will still connect the dots. I worked for the DOT as an ITS officer in the late 80s to the late 90s. It's a period that I'm exceptionally proud of. And I will join the dots. It's less about my story, but it's about joining the dots and about seeing how it is relevant to India. I consider myself extremely fortunate. And this is why I belong to a peculiar generation at the cost of revealing my age. I worked in the Department of Telecommunications, and when I joined, that was in 1988, the department was changing. They were leapfrogging technology in India. And my job was to plan and roll out the network in the state of Andhra Pradesh. I used to be based in Hyderabad. Why is this conversation relevant? Because when I joined and I was planning and rolling out the network in Andhra Pradesh, we had manual telephone exchanges and different varieties of manual telephone exchanges. We had Strowger exchanges, we had crossbar exchanges, and at the time I joined, can you believe it, we were introducing pulse code modulation, cable PCM, digital microwave, and TDM switches. And during the late 80s and the 90s, because I was in network planning and rollout, I had the opportunity to actually work on all of these technologies. And then I worked for a GSM operator, and today I'm on this panel talking about 5G in India. It's just unbelievable. When I started my career in 88 in the DOT, we had all kinds of signaling. We had loop signaling, ring down signaling. We had R2MF for those that are in my age group. And then we had all the VoIP signaling and so on and so forth. And now we are talking 5G. I think what is important to relate it back to the story is a big geography like India had the opportunity in those days to leapfrog, because we had manual Strowger crossbar exchanges and we were migrating to EWSDs and AXE10s in those days. There was a huge leapfrogging. We skipped a number of stages. It's slightly different now because India is now on par with the rest of the world. You have 4G rollouts. So it is about leveraging. There is no need to leapfrog. And that's the great advantage. We had to do, in my days, we had to do a lot of leapfrogging. So today, in India, for rolling out 5G in India, it's a lot easier. Now, having said that, there are a few things that are important. Nothing that the other speakers haven't said. It's about preparedness. It's about government support. It's about building the ecosystem. It's about PPP. It's about everyone working together to understand the business dynamics, the economics, the technology standardization, the rollout, right? If you go back to a few years ago, when SMS was launched, when USSD was launched, they were all applications looking, they were all technologies looking for a killer application. I think the standardization bodies have done a great work in saying, we're going to make your job easier. We've defined the use cases. The difference that will make a big change for India is the standardization bodies didn't define it technology up. They defined it use case down. And I think that's going to be a huge plus for a country like India, where the possibilities are infinite. The sheer size, the sheer number of combinations of business models, solutions, because we have some great, the world wouldn't have call tones, ringtones wouldn't have been so popular if it hadn't been for India. The concept of the missed call originated in India. God knows what will originate given the huge technology spectrum, the huge spectrum we have, and the fact that we have a baseline of these use cases and use case areas, I think is going to be a great opportunity for India to leverage.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more from you. And, you know, I mean, of course, I have also been part of this journey, not as obviously as, but I have seen the shift from wireline to wireless and, you know, been part of this journey. And I'm sure many of us who are here have kind of seen it. I mean, AI, ML, and all this computing by machines was never ever heard of, at least at the times when we started. I mean, when I started my work, sending an email outside your corporate domain used to be a really, really tough thing. So we used to work with faxes at that point of time. So TS, a similar question, you know, I mean, a related question. So 5G in India can have two flavors: the global R&D in India, and then of course 5G in India for India, which is when 5G becomes available in India. How do you see we could cross leverage from the two of it? Because global R&D in India is already starting. It's in fact already happening. Most of us who are working in India are actually contributing to it, both with respect to R&D, with respect to device development, with respect to doing the development and doing the deliveries out of India. So how do you see all of this coming together, cross-leveraging, and be getting ready when 5G actually comes to India?
Yeah, I promise you this will be a shorter answer than the previous ones. But the analogy is when AI ML became popular in the world a few years ago. There was lots of commentary around the contribution of India. Like anywhere else in the world, commentary tends to be at the extremes, right? There was one theory that said you have so many PhDs in AI and ML all over the world, and India has a very small proportion of that. And then there was the other extreme, which now I will relate to what you said. It is actually factual because of all the presence of the big consulting companies, the IBMs, the Accentures, the Capgeminis of the world, and the big Indian SI players, the TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindras of the world. The amount of AI ML work that has been done or delivered out of India has been phenomenal. But a lot of it has been targeted towards providing service to customers or stakeholders outside of India. So the question to all of us is, how do we funnel a big part of that in a 5G context inward looking to India? There is no shortage of talent. And we've all agreed during the session that it's going to be less and less of a pure telco play. It's going to be more and more about ecosystem play. It's going to be more about AI and ML. It's going to be about robotics. It's going to be about so many other things. And how do we divert? So all the talent is there, all the skills is there. And people like yourselves are in a great position to see how that funnels into diverting that talent, or diverting is too strong a word, leveraging that talent to make it more India focused than it is today. Because if there was one thing that I would put huge emphasis on, is on focus, preparedness and focus. There is no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of the ability to create the ecosystem. Again, I said it was a short answer, but it ended up being a long answer, but I hope it does answer the question.
No, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And in fact, you know, a very key takeaway for me, and, you know, specifically when kind of I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, 5G is already trialing and launched in the other countries and not coming in India. We all need to remember, if we have been able to leapfrog technology in such a significant from, you know, the classical TDM switched telephones, like you just said, TS, to the digital ones, and then, you know, leapfrog across generations. I'm sure with already all the, you know, technology, R&D, skill set available in India, we will be able to make 5G happen in India as and when it is available in India. So any, you know, last ending comments? I see we have used up our hour, and we would obviously want to give our participants to ask their questions and have you all answer their questions. Any last comments from any of you before we open the floor for Q&A?
Monica, I think I would just comment on the question you asked. Okay, the confidence. I see. Look, I'm ever optimist. Okay, so I do have the confidence in terms of the capabilities for us to really build the right infrastructure and ecosystem for 5G. But I think the challenge is not small. Okay, I think there is a lot of cooperative relationship across multiple players, the telecom players, the government agency, the industry bodies, people who really have interest in actually creating 5G use cases that needs to come together, for really us to this thing. The second thing is, I also think that, talking about the ecosystem play, which this thing, I think when you look at telecom operators, they really have a very interesting position. They understand the technology very well. They understand what is getting deployed. I think what is important is for them to create this ecosystem available, or make it be, enable this ecosystem for the end users. Now, enabling doesn't mean necessarily you doing all the R&D. Enabling could also be aggregating and being able to provide tested, proven technologies, on one single platform, on one single window. So I do think that's, I'm optimistic, but I think there is a fair amount of work.
Completely with you, Deepak, and thank you so much. I mean, in fact, coming from you, this really, really means a lot, and I'm sure all of us have taken note of it. All the people who are actually listening in would have also taken note of it. So, for me, the key takeaways are, and this is in fact what we've been doing for many, many years. It starts with the use case. It starts with actually the real business requirement, and then it's mapping that to the technology, and then plugging in all the gaps, which is basically an ecosystem and a platform play. So absolutely spot on. Lots of work to be done, and I just hope that we all come together to do this. So Suman, over to you. I think we are doing good time-wise. So should we start the Q&A?
Yes, Monica. I think certainly it was. I mean, for some of us, we don't want the session to ever end, because the discussion are such such insightful sessions, discussions being made and points being made. I think we have got some questions here. The questions tab on the right hand side, which you guys can all see. Starting off with some of them which have got some upvotes. What are the low latency applications in farming operations? This is asked by Krishna Sirohi. So wants to know about low latency applications in farming operations. Who would like to have a go at that?
So let me try, because I brought agriculture and farming into this thing. Let me try and give a perspective on that. So look, first of all, I think we need to understand the Indian farming ecosystem is small, medium farms, very different from, let's say, the Western ecosystem, where we are talking about large farms. These farms already use a fair amount of automation. They already have equipment which is autonomous, autonomous or auto guidance, which is already there. In India, of course, the ecosystem is different. Okay, and I do think that a very big application in India could be remote control. Okay, just because, look, our farms are today not necessarily ready for really completely autonomous applications. Okay, but they can be. We can still have remote control. So, whether it is remote control of equipment, whether it is even drones. I mean, if you walk around a farm, you can, the way you monitor the crop health is by actually walking around and looking at this thing. Now, you can see it on the edges. You can't see inside the plot. Okay. And, so could you use drones? Could you use remote control to really actually look at the farm, do specific best application or whatever else is needed, really, to kind of manage the whole farming process? Yeah. I think that is clearly an application.
Sure. And just adding to
Thanks.
And just adding to what Deepak said, I mean, so the way 5G or for that matter, good connectivity comes in handy is that when you talk of drones and then when you talk of these applications, one is of course just being able to control it remotely. The other is if you have low latency and a high throughput, then just imagine mounting those drones with HD cameras, with live streaming cameras, with depth sense cameras, with high resolution cameras. The amount of action and the amount of activity you can do with that drone is what is the next level of control. So the control, again, when you talk of control, it could be simply being able, so, even switching on and off a water pump from remote is a control. But then what capability technology brings to take the range of activities for control is the true value, and which is where I'm hoping that technology will come in and make all of that possible.
And I think servitizing is a big part of really making that, because really you can't expect small farmer to have this equipment or have this capability. How do you make this available on a servitized, basis? That is critical.
So just think of, and farming Uber application kind of a thing, where you have a pool of equipments and everybody just rents it, uses it, returns it. I mean, if we can have Ubers and Olas, why can't we have farming sheds equipment? So perhaps that's the future.
True. Now, moving from farming to an interesting sector like education in India. I mean, like all of you said, all the sectors have been, hit very bad, and everyone is trying to look at new business models and opportunities to come out of it. How does 5G impact the future of education system in India, so as to say?
Suman, when it comes to education is one area which is, so, if you can kind of look into the aspects of, what in fact Sandeep also mentioned, B2C, B2B2X, or B2B2C. Education is one which is a classic example of, directly education to students in universities, schools, and experimentation, R&D, research, and technology. And I won't just say 5G, I would say technology, including connectivity, good connectivity with 5G, impacts it all. So just taking the COVID instance, and I being a parent, I mean, the shift, it's in fact a forced shift from in-person class to online classes has had to happen. It was in fact forced upon us, and it would have no way been possible if we did not have mobile broadband. Enhanced mobile broadband will only make it better, easier, and perhaps more easier for everybody to imbibe onto. But that is just one aspect. The other is what you can do with the capabilities which 5G brings. So for example, currently when you do lessons, it's all about reading books or reading blogs. You just take the immersive and the cognitive experiences into education. Just imagine doing geography with a 3D view of whatever you are studying. Just imagine doing medical sciences with a 3D view, with a kind of, being able to wear the HoloLens or the AR, VR equipment, be able to slice, dice the heart, see the walls, turn the lateral view, and all of that. So the possibilities of leveraging technology for education is absolutely, it's huge and it's vast with 5G. So, and which is where the different flavors of 5G comes in. So in future, we would hopefully look at captive and private 5G networks in all the universities and academic institutions all over the world, including India, where all of these experiences then would be possible. We will also look at enhanced mobile broadband being available to the mass consumers, where then when needed, online remote education is possible, and specifically to those people who are not able to attend in person.
Thank you, Monica. I guess we couldn't agree more. I mean, more and more as we delve into the future, we have parents, children, everyone hooked onto the home broadband. Children's on Zoom calls, parents on probably A-Meet calls, Zoom calls, WebEx calls. Then it's connected with the TV, the watch, God knows what else, even the shoes. Maybe.
So, Suman, I will just give you a very personal experience. I mean, it's lockdown stage, and being the homemaker also. The first thing which I missed in my house when the lockdown happened was a dishwasher. So post the lockdown, I could get the dishwasher delivered to my house, but obviously nobody can come to install it. So I actually installed the dishwasher myself using YouTube videos and using a WhatsApp video call. But then there was this one, water leaking strip which I had to attach, which I could not, because the technician kept telling me, ma'am, pick up the machine and fit it there. And I couldn't understand. If there were immersive technologies available, I could have been able to do it, because he would have just shown me how to do it in the virtual thing, and I would have been able to replicate it. And that's the simplest example I can give you. I, being a technology person myself, I kind of missed that gap.
Coming back to one of the next questions, Aditya Pandit. Okay, looking at the trajectory at which technology has progressed over the years, automation has affected skilled labor on one way or the other. Given the nature of growth of technology, will the capabilities of 5G affect employment rates going forward?
mean, obviously, all the technologies are going to one of the key impact of any technology is going to be productivity. Okay, and obviously the productivity levels need to go up. I mean, it is required anyway to compete in this world that you will have to keep, improving the productivity levels. Now that is going to obviously, you can say, okay, it is going to have an impact on the employment. Okay, but at the same time, I think what has happened historically is that the growth driven by all these technologies outpaces the optimization that is done for the productivity. Okay, so my take is, that's a natural process. It's proven to have worked in historically. Uh, you know, yeah, of course, the jobs could change, the role or the nature of the jobs could change, uh, but I think there is a reasonable, there is a balance which naturally gets achieved. That's my view on this.
And
Yeah.
Suman, I'm sorry, but I'm very tempted to chip in. While of course we
Yes,
may
please.
feel the fear, but if today we did not have technology, the entire world would have shut down. We need to realize it. We need to be thankful for it. The fact that we are able to work today, make work happen. Some sectors, yes, have been impacted, and we very well realize it. I think all of us realize it. The airline industry, perhaps manufacturing during the extreme lockdown days. But the balance between in-person, 10% staffing in office, maintaining social distancing in office would not have been possible if 90% people could not work from anywhere. And now we are talking of the future of work, working from anywhere, working from home. Just imagine the kind of potential it opens up for the, we talk of mobility having given communication and a connectivity to the unconnected. The new future technology and the work from anywhere will give opportunity to the people to work from anywhere who earlier could not. Work from home, work flexi, work in the new future gig economy. I mean, seeing today, I think technology is more of a boon than a bane. Of course, the challenges come with it, and I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. See, Monica, social challenges will be there, and they will have to be addressed in specific areas, and they will require attention.
Absolutely, that I completely agree. So it's a bane and a boon. I mean, obviously, there has to be balance. There has to be reskilling. There are some jobs which can never be done, which require in person and hands-on.
One other thing is from Dr. Patil, which is about how 5G will turn tables for India's Atmanirbhar kind of ambitious initiatives, which talks about self-reliance and self-dependency. Will it bring more revolution the way it brought after NTP in 1985 by the Gandhi government?
So, whatever we say will be our optimism. And, honestly, I think all of us here are working towards it. It would be, I think it would be all, it would be a not so feel good thing. And to a large extent, our failure if 5G as a technology doesn't mature, doesn't meet its objectives. So hopefully the optimistic and the answer, our ambition is that, yes, it will work. I think let's wait a few years, we'll get to know.
The next one comes from Mr. Narasimhan. It is said 5G rollout may get delayed in India due to financial problems and some telecom operators going through a rough phase. How will this affect business prospects of Indian companies working business solutions for foreign clients on 5G? So is there any way out of that?
So, Suman, let me take this question, and specifically because, I am working in India, and, I work in a setup where we do the global R&D and the delivery outside India. So, there are two aspects to 5G. One is the 5G R&D, and the other is 5G, the public launch. So July 2019, Government of India DOT has already opened up the 5G trial spectrum licenses for R&D and trialing in India. In fact, Capgemini also has that license now. So R&D in India for 5G is already undergoing. Qualcomm, Nokia, Ericsson, us, all the the device ODMs, even the mobile phone manufacturers, all of them have 5G related R&D and testing and those capabilities in India. The other question of 5G becoming so 5G in that regard, with respect to captive R&D licenses and deployments, is already there in India. The next is the public availability, which I think is a macro thing and which the government is working on. So, but the R&D it's there, and any Indian enterprise can apply for it. And in fact, I would like to commend the government of India. It is the trial spectrum license is available with very little. It's just a simple application form and with absolutely no commercials involved to it. So it's a very, very forward-looking release, which a policy and the availability which they have done.
Thanks for that, Monica. We have, I think, time for two more questions. We'll just try to take them as quickly as possible. The next question comes from Pramod Goel. How is Open RAN/vRAN enable 5G deployment? Will it help in larger deployments? Where is use cases for 5G in India kickoff, indoor or outdoor, considering 3.5 gigahertz band being planned?
I think there are two questions to it. So, Adrian, would you like to take the ORAN vRAN part, because that's the standards and you would be able to?
Yes.
Yes, I can talk about that. I mean, there are two places where this work is taking place. You have 3GPP, which is developing standards according to the traditional approach. You have the ORAN Alliance, which is developing an alternative approach that says, what if we open up the RAN interfaces to enable multi-vendor within the RAN, deep within the RAN itself. Both of these are complementary approaches. They're not sort of one versus the other. And it's a matter of taste, really, about whether industry feels confident enough to move towards an ORAN approach, or whether they wish to stay with the traditional hardware approach. I think this is something that will evolve over time. There are obviously advantages in moving towards Open RAN. It does open up the market to many, many new players. It means that new entrants can indeed start to sell RAN components. But that also comes with a risk, because you have to have interoperability. And there is this trade-off between, how far do you standardize, how far do you open up, how far do you leave to innovation? So I think if we took a snapshot right now, we don't see a great appetite to rapidly move towards a full Open RAN approach. But I think if we have this discussion in 5 years' time, maybe that landscape will have changed.
Thanks for that, Adrian. I think the second question here was, where is the use case for 5G in India kickoff, indoor or outdoor, considering the 3.5 gigahertz band being planned?
So, the spectrum auctions haven't happened as of now, but, 5G is not just 3.5, 5G is also in the sub 1 gigahertz band. And, the Indian operators do have the sub 1 gigahertz band also. And hopefully, earlier there was talk of 700 megahertz being auctioned in the 4G spectrum, which now being available would be auctioned and is a valid band for 5G, which actually then gives very good 5G coverage in the outdoors. So again, depends. I mean, 3.5 is not just an indoor band. It is, I would say, a low coverage area band. So it doesn't restrict itself to just indoors. But yes, it will typically in the outdoors require a higher antenna and then obviously cover a smaller area. So it will be more like a hotspot coverage. But if 700 comes into India, you will have the outdoor as well, and wide area outdoor.
One last question is something that we can take before we sum up the session. I think this is from Mayuresh Mahapatra. How will 5G change the wireline architecture that currently supports 4G mobile backhaul? And will 5G latency be lower if processing is done in the cloud?
TS, I think this is for you. This is a wireline 5G question. I think this is best answered by you.
Yeah, probably Adrian would like to comment first.
Please. Sorry, my bad.
Yes, Adrian.
Well, I was happy to go second, but I'll make my point anyway, that whilst we're talking about wireline, we shouldn't forget that 3GPP is standardizing integrated wireless backhaul. So now it's foreseen in the future that you won't be totally dependent on fiber to backhaul from your radio nodes, that will be done over the radio interface. Then looking at latency, of course, that really depends, I think, on where you have your mobile edge compute function, how far you are from that mobile edge compute function. And MEC is a very, very important part of future 5G deployments.
Thank you, Adrian. TS, your views?
I think pretty much aligned. Obviously, they're going to coexist for a long time. In the short term, the dependence on fiber-based connectivity, and in the long term, the dependence for the NEC on wireline communications will be significant, simply because of the vast estate out there and the huge footprint that exists today in the wireline network.
Thank you so much, TS. Thank you, Adrian. Monica, I think we have come to the last part of the session, wherein I would want you to summarize it for all our attendees and for the speakers, and just some parting words from all of you. And
okay, so thankfully I've got this great opportunity to listen to all of them, and to me the key messages are: one is to identify the use cases, start with the use cases. And then, if I may just use what Sandeep, Adrian, and TS kind of summarized, it's about the ecosystem, and it's about getting it right together. And Deepak very clearly mentioned that it's a lot of work. So I think experimentation, getting that ecosystem to work, to standardize it, to make it work, to learn and improve it with experimentation, and then make it, if I may say, enterprise ready, is what is very, very critical. So all the three steps, all these three criteria are my key takeaways. And yes, and then hopefully we will have a good solution in place. So everybody else, any comments, please?
Yeah, I would just say, Monica, that what you said about use cases, starting with the use cases, I think we have to be very conscious. India is different. India is different in many ways. And it's very important that when we look at the use cases, we really try and understand what is the real use cases in India. And then it's important that the respective beneficiaries, bodies, or industry bodies, or in place stakeholders who really benefit from these use cases somehow come together, to really drive the whole ecosystem. I do think that there's a clear opportunity. I think India probably has more opportunity to leverage, but it has to be we have to figure out the right way.
I think if I was to summarize just for the audience, my sort of key takeaways again, why we should be thinking differently about 5G than we've thought about 4G, 3G, and 2G. I would say think both licensed and unlicensed spectrum, because they are both now viable propositions. Think public and private networks. This is entirely new, but it's entirely valid now as we go forward. Think well beyond mobile broadband. Do think about machine-type communications and ultra-reliable communications. And think about industry expansion. Think about the industries that can really exploit these fantastic capabilities that we're putting to the table.
Spot on, Adrian. Couldn't agree more.
TS, moving on to you, and then Sandeep. Last word.
Okay. I think great opportunity for India, but a lot of work needs to be done. Preparedness is super important, and a cultural change to not think telco only, or industry only, or solution integration only. They all need to work together. Ecosystem partnership across all players involved, whether it's the government, the telcos, the industries, the academia, and the systems integrators consulting. It will take all of these to make it happen.
True. Thank you so much, TS, for those words. Sandeep?
All right. So on top of what everybody has already shared, I think as much as the top-down ecosystem building is important, it's equally important that we have a culture of bottom-up experimentation. Things like labs, these hackathons, ideation kind of challenges, because the reality of the 5G will be that a lot of the use cases, a lot of the actual scenarios will need to be taught. I mean, we don't have all the answers, so experimentation and the lab will be extremely important.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sandeep. I think it was a wonderful session. Couldn't thank any of you less, or I mean, it just goes out to say that how much of an effort all of you have made to come to the session today and answer the questions put forward by the audience, and also share some key insights about this important topic on 5G and where we are now and where we are heading towards. I think with that, it's been wonderful having all of you. Thank you so much, Monica, Adrian, Deepak, TS, Sandeep. Thanks a lot, for making this, and thank you all, who could join us for this session today. I'm sure that the key takeaways that everyone talked about will help you, answer some of the questions you had. And until then, it's goodbye and take care. God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.